Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to explore something truly fascinating, the evolution of design itself. It's this incredible journey from the simple, beautiful things we can physically touch to the vast, completely invisible systems that quietly shape our daily lives. So let's take our time, slow down a bit, and really unpack this together.
Let's just dive right in with a fundamental question. What actually happens when the problems we need to design for are no longer simple things we can just hold in our hands? Instead of, say, a physical object, we're now dealing with human emotional journeys, deeply connected communities, complex policy environments, and massive flows of data. The world has just become incredibly complex, hasn't it?
Now, to deeply understand where we're going, we first need to look at where we came from. Back in the 20th century, traditional design education focused almost entirely on the craft of the physical. Design was deeply rooted in architecture, in art, in pure craftsmanship. We learned to make beautiful objects, like a perfectly carved wooden chair. Things we just love to look at, hold, and touch. And sure, maybe later on we stuck a computer inside and designed some interactive graphics for it, but the core was always physical.
But here is the crucial point. While we still absolutely love beautiful objects, mastering the physical object alone, it's just no longer enough. The challenges we face today are vast and they are deeply intertwined. So designing for the 21st century means we have to fundamentally shift our focus from just physical craft to really understanding the deeply connected needs of every single person involved in a much larger system. Okay, picture this for a second. Imagine you're designing a waiting line. Maybe it's at a bank, a busy cafeteria, or customs control at the airport. Think about it. Traditional craft skills, they're completely irrelevant here. You aren't building a physical object to look at. Instead, you're orchestrating the invisible. You have to build a system that beautifully accounts for the very real human experience of everyone who has to stand in that line. And that brings us to the very first major tool we use to do this, the journey map. It literally tracks what a person feels and experiences sequentially over time, from the moment they enter a space to their interaction, all the way to the resolution. We're actively mapping those emotional highs and lows. But remember, the customers only half the story. What about the cashier they speak to, the line cook, the cleaning staff? You see, their journeys matter just as much. Because the customer is just one piece of the puzzle. Service design invented this beautiful concept called the service blueprint. It essentially expands our view into two dimensions. It layers the journey of every single component, the front stage staff, the backstage staff, the underlying computer systems, and then it superimposes raw human emotion right on top of those cold, hard operational mechanics. It finally gives us the complete picture. When you look at a blueprint like this, time moves steadily from start to finish. But beneath that timeline, we uncover all these hidden layers. The front stage staff we actually interact with, the backstage staff completely hidden from our view, and the underlying systems supporting the whole shebang. And weaving through this entire rigid grid is the flowing, unpredictable reality of human emotion, from pure delight down to frustration and hopefully back up to relief.
But what happens when the problems get even bigger? Well, we often fall into what we call the technical fix trap. A traditional mindset might just say, hey, let's bring in the bulldozers and just rip up the entire city to put in new sewers. It's brute force engineering. But the 21st century socio-technical approach, it asks us to pause. It says, hey, maybe we need to sit down with the community, the local leaders and health workers to find a harmonious solution that actually works for them, without completely destroying their home in the process.
Which leads us to a really profound question. How do we genuinely shift this mindset? How do we map the system and thoughtfully evaluate local culture, instead of just forcing top-down engineering onto people? Basically, how do we stop telling communities what they need and start truly listening to what they actually require? Let's take an isolated village in India, for example. There's extreme poverty, no electricity, no existing water supply, and certainly no sewers. A standard Western technical fix simply is not going to work here. The socio-technical method demands that we map out local capabilities first. We have to deeply understand the local economics, the politics, and the culture to see exactly what the people can realistically build and maintain for themselves. Because in this work, context is absolutely everything.
Now, we can apply this exact same logic to our crowded cities. Confronted with a massive traffic jam, a traditional engineering mindset usually asks, how do we build more roads? We're constantly saying, oh, just one more lane will fix it, but it never does, right? A 21st century designer looks at this and asks instead, how do we remap the system? We orchestrate economics with congestion pricing, we navigate politics with clever zoning laws, and we get employers to shift commute times. We are literally designing behaviors, not just pouring pavement.
Or think about the thick smog that blankets so many of our cities. Clearing the air isn't about inventing giant, magical air purifiers. No, it requires orchestrating the competing needs of so many different human beings. You have politicians navigating economic trade-offs, healthcare workers managing the fallout, agricultural workers who desperately need viable alternatives to crop burning, and citizens trying to adopt clean cooking fuels. It is a vast, deeply interconnected web.
So, when we contrast these approaches side by side, a super clear pattern emerges. The technical fix trap always relies on brute force, digging sewers, adding lanes, building purifiers. But the true socio-technical solution is all about alignment. It's off-grid water mapping, routing transit smartly, and aligning farm subsidies. The specific components change, sure, but the core design process, this intricate orchestration, remains exactly identical.
When we sit back and reflect on this evolution, the shift is just dramatic. We've moved from physical outputs to invisible systems, from mere aesthetics to deep economics, politics, and local culture. The skill set is no longer just industrial drafting, it's multidisciplinary orchestration. And that brings up a highly practical question. If the requirements have changed so drastically, who on earth is actually qualified to do this kind of work today?
Well, here is a rather surprising fact for you. If you look at some of the best systems designers in the world today, many of them completely lack formal design training. I'm serious. They hold undergraduate degrees in physics, engineering, medicine, or even English literature. And why is that? Because while traditional schools teach the craft of design, these diverse backgrounds provide a much broader understanding of how the world actually works, which is a fundamental prerequisite for navigating all this modern complexity.
This fundamentally changes what the job actually is. We have to completely abandon the myth of the lone genius designer sitting quietly alone in a studio. The 21st century designer is part manager, part orchestrator, kind of like a conductor leading a symphony. You have to learn to work with politicians, health workers, and local residents all at once. You literally must let the local community dictate what is actually needed. It's honestly become much more of a management job than a traditional design job.
Ultimately, the future is socio-technical. Everything might start as a simple physical object, like a cup of coffee, but it naturally evolves into a wonderfully complex, interconnected network. Design is no longer just about making things look beautiful. It is the strategic methodology we use to orchestrate the economics, the politics, and the incredibly complex human realities of our world. And that is exactly what we need to teach future generations.
So, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. Are we finally ready to stop obsessing over just crafting beautiful physical objects? And are we ready to step up, to truly listen, and to orchestrate the invisible systems that actually shape the world we live in? Take a moment to really think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.